Welcome to Debate the News True Crime. Tonight, we delve into the disappearance of 18-year-old Natalee Holloway.
Before we begin, a warning to our listeners. This episode involves discussions of murder, violence, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know needs support, help may be available via the Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. We approach this story with respect for the victims, Natalee Holloway and Stephanie Flores Ramirez. May they both rest in peace.
Adrienne and I are not attorneys, law enforcement officials, or medical professionals. We research each case thoroughly, but this show is recorded live with minimal editing, and any factual errors are unintentional. Any individuals we discuss who haven't been convicted of a crime are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The opinions of our guests and audience members are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of myself, Adrienne, or Debate the News.
Let's dive into the timeline of the disappearance of Natalee Holloway.
May 30th, 2005, Aruba. Natalee Holloway and her Mountain Brook, Alabama classmates were celebrating their high school graduation on the Caribbean island of Aruba. On their final night, Natalee went to Carlos and Charlie's, a popular nightclub in Oranjestad. She was last seen leaving around 1:30 a.m. with three local young men, including 17-year-old Joran Sloot. When she didn't show up for her flight home the next day, alarm bells started to ring. Authorities launched extensive searches by land and sea, but they found no trace of Natalee.
From early on, attention focused on Joran Sloot and brothers Deepak and Satish Kalpo. They were the last people seen with Natalee. And in June of 2005, Aruban police, they arrested all three on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. However, their story shifted and no physical evidence was found. So by September of 2005, the three young men were released without charges due to lack of evidence. Then the case stalled and frustration grew as leads dried up. Joran's behavior only fueled suspicion. He frequently lied and kept changing his story about that night.
Indeed, Joran's story changed repeatedly. He initially claimed he dropped Natalee off at their hotel, a lie which was later disproven by hotel surveillance cameras. Then later, in a 2006 TV interview, he insisted he had left her alone on a beach and denied harming her. Still, no charges materialized. In November 2007, Joran and the Kalpo brothers were arrested again, but within a month, all were released once more for lack of evidence.
So in early 2008, there came a potential breakthrough. A hidden camera video by Dutch reporter Peter de Vries caught Joran seemingly confessing to the involvement in Natalee's disappearance. And the Aruban authorities reopened the case, but they couldn't collaborate Joran's taped statements. And again, they did not file charges. And once more, Joran walked away with no legal consequences. And through it all, Beth and Dave Holloway, they're Natalee's parents, they never ever stopped pushing for answers.
Nearly 5 years after Natalee vanished, Joran approached Beth Holloway with a chilling proposition. He demanded $250,000 in exchange for telling her what happened to Natalee and where to find her remains. Beth immediately alerted the FBI, and together they set up a sting operation. In March of 2010, Beth's attorney, John Q. Kelly, met Joran at an Aruba hotel and paid him $25,000, which was a mix of cash and wire transfers. In return, Joran spun yet another lie. He claimed Natalee had died accidentally. He said he threw her to the ground after an argument and that she hit her head on a rock and died instantly, and that his now-deceased father buried her body under a house foundation. After pocketing the money, Joran later emailed Kelly that his story was, quote, worthless, blatantly admitting that it was a lie. This was a cruel hoax that preyed on Natalee's grieving family.
U.S. authorities promptly charged Joran with wire fraud, extortion for that scheme. But before they could arrest him, he vanished from Aruba and resurfaced in Peru. Prosecutors later said he may have used some of that money to help fund his travel. Then, on May 30th of 2010, which was exactly 5 years after Natalee disappeared, Vandersloot was linked to another young woman's death. 21-year-old Peruvian business student Stephanie Flores Ramirez found dead in a Lima hotel registered in his name.
Investigators said Vandersloot met Flores at a Lima casino and went with her to the hotel. Judges later laid out the violence. They said he elbowed her in the face, beat her repeatedly, and strangled her with a bloodied shirt. Prosecutors also said he took nearly $300 in cash and her credit cards after killing her.
Vandersloot fled Peru, but he didn't get far. He was captured 4 days later in Chile and returned to Peru. And in one version of the events, he told police he flew into a rage after Flores discovered his connection to the Natalee Holloway case while they were in his hotel room, a claim forensic experts disputed. Judges also noted he later tried to recant his confession, saying it was made under duress and without an official translator. Meanwhile, in the United States, a federal grand jury indicted him in Alabama in June of 2010 on the wire fraud, the extortion charges that were tied to Beth Holloway. And according to published reports, that indictment came the same day he was arrested in the Flores case.
On January 12, 2012, an Alabama judge declared Natalee Holloway legally dead. Back in Peru, Vandersloot was ultimately found guilty of the murder of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. A 3-judge panel sentenced him to 28 years in prison for first-degree murder with aggravating factors of ferocity and great cruelty, and ordered him to pay $75,000 in reparations to Flores' family. With credit for time served, the court said his sentence would run until June of 2038. Meanwhile, the U.S. extortion case tied to Natalee stayed pending. Peru would have to agree to transfer him before those charges could finally move forward.
While the Holloways fought from the outside, Vandersloot sat in a Peruvian prison system that kept moving him around. The Associated Press, it reported he was transferred among Peruvian prisons over the years amid reports he enjoyed illicit privileges such as television, internet access, and a cell phone, as well as allegations he threatened to kill a warden. By 2023, he was being held at Chalapalca. I think I got that right. Chalapalca. That's a remote high altitude maximum security prison in Peru's Andes. His own lawyer called Chalapalca the worst prison in the world, saying any U.S. prison would actually be like a 5-star hotel by comparison.
While still incarcerated in Peru, a court sentenced Vandersloot to an additional 18 years and 4 months for drug trafficking, after prosecutors accused him of coordinating cocaine smuggling inside prison and sending cocaine out in parcels.
So now in May of 2023, Peru finally agreed to temporarily extradite Joran Vandersloot to the United States to face the fraud and extortion charges. It's been a very long and painful journey, but the persistence of many is going to pay off. And together, we are finally getting justice for Natalee. That is what Natalee's mom, Beth Holloway, said in a statement. And on June 8th of 2023, Joran was flown from Peru to Birmingham, Alabama to stand trial in a U.S. federal court. Initially, he pleaded not guilty. But on October 18th of 2023, facing the overwhelming evidence, Joran Vandersloot changed his plea to guilty on the extortion and fraud charges.
As part of that plea deal, Joran was required to finally reveal the truth about what really happened to Natalee Holloway. In exchange, he received a 20-year U.S. prison sentence that will run concurrently with his Peruvian sentence. This plea bargain ensured he would not serve additional time for his crimes against the Holloways, but it delivered something more valuable to the family: answers. In a recorded interview with his attorney, witnessed by U.S. agents, Joran confessed in horrific detail to killing Natalee. After 18 years of secrecy and lies, his own words finally laid out the truth.
According to Joran's confession, after leaving the club in 2005, he took Natalee to a quiet beach instead of back to her hotel. They began kissing, But when Joran tried to force himself on her, Natalee said no and resisted. She even kneed him in the groin to stop his assault. Enraged at being rebuffed, Joran retaliated by kicking Natalee extremely hard in the face, knocking her to the ground. She was briefly unconscious, possibly even dead from that kick, he admitted. And to ensure she could not call for help, Joran then grabbed a nearby cinder block and smashed her head with it. And once Natalee was dead, Joran dragged her body to the water and pushed her into the sea, letting the ocean carry her away. He then walked home alone before dawn, leaving no trace of the crime.
For Natalee's family, the details were devastating. Beth Holloway said that as heart-wrenching as it was to learn how fiercely her daughter fought back like hell, at least now there were no more unknowns. U.S. prosecutors noted that Joran passed a polygraph test, indicating that this time it's possible he was actually telling the truth. The judge, Anna Manasco, emphasized that Joran had brutally murdered two young women who refused his advances, Natalee in 2005 and Stephanie in 2010. Under the plea agreement, Joran cannot be prosecuted further for Natalee's death, effectively meaning he escaped additional punishment for that murder. In court, he offered a hollow apology, claiming he had quote-unquote found Jesus in prison and insisting, quote, "I am not the same person today as I was then." Outside the courthouse, Beth Holloway told reporters, quote, "I got the answers I've been searching for the last 18 years. That never-ending nightmare is over, and to me, that's better than closure."
In October of the same year, Aruba's prosecutor office said Natalee Holloway's disappearance is still an open investigation and requested U.S. court documents, transcripts, and investigative materials, including Vandersloot's description of the killing, to review what procedural steps, if any, could still be taken. But an attorney for Natalee's father said his understanding was that Aruba's statute of limitations for murder has expired, and the United States has no jurisdiction to prosecute a crime committed in Aruba.
After the U.S. proceedings, Vandersloot was returned to Peru to continue serving his sentence for the murder of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. Under the plea agreement, the 20-year U.S. sentence runs concurrently with his Peru time, meaning he would only serve time in the U.S. if he were released from Peru before that U.S. sentence ends.
In late 2025, the case returns to headlines again. Netflix announced a three-part documentary series revisiting Natalee Holloway's disappearance and the years-long fight for answers, with Beth Holloway, her mom, telling the story from 2005 through to the 2023 confession. And that documentary is set to drop later this year.
And on December 13th, 2025, Peru's Ministry of Justice said emergency protocols were activated at the prison Vandersloot was staying at, after prison staff found Vandersloot in a situation that compromised his physical integrity after an alleged suicide attempt. The ministry reported he was stabilized and, as of their last statement, he was in stable condition, under medical evaluation, and under constant monitoring. As of January 2026, Vandersloot remains locked up in a Peruvian prison. To this day, Natalee Holloway's body has never been found. She would have been 39 years old today.
All right. So we are live here on Chatter Social. If you've been listening to our podcast, you know after we give the outline of the case, we open up the floor for discussion and we debate it. So join us live on Chatter Social, download the app, and come on in. We want to have you here. All right. So, I got to breathe because this case, as a mother, I just couldn't imagine what she was going through. And it's so sad. So, I guess the number one question would be, did the Arubian authorities mishandle the initial investigation?
I absolutely think they mishandled the investigation. There were all sorts of allegations from corruption to incompetence. It's kind of never ending when people recount what it was like when they went there in those early days trying to find her. There was really an attitude that this wasn't a big deal. She probably just got drunk and fell asleep or lost track of time, and she'll be back eventually. So a lack of urgency in the beginning, that was a huge missed opportunity.
I definitely think that the whole entire thing was mishandled, and I think that there was a lot of cover-ups going on, so it's a sad case, and I don't think that the family will ever get the true justice that they deserve.
So there is a strong argument that early mistakes mattered, right? And her disappearance in the crucial first hours, that's the time when it's the most fragile. But Aruba's dealing with a missing adult, okay? At this point, it's not a confirmed crime. They don't know. The mom from the United States is calling and saying, my daughter didn't make it. She is missing. So I'm going to say no. They did not mishandle the initial investigation.
Whatever happened to the brothers? After their first arrest, they were released because there wasn't enough evidence. But didn't they talk during their second one?
So the two brothers that were arrested with Vandersloot, they were arrested initially, then released. Then they were all rearrested. One thing that's interesting about the brothers is that the police officer left a recording device in the car when the three of them were in there. And on that recording, they said quite a few things that indicated that all three of them may have been involved.
That's what I remember it from. That's right. After that, though, if that other young lady had not been murdered in 2010, they've never been questioned since. They didn't go back to them and corroborate what he said or any of that, correct?
Not that I'm
Like
aware
they've
of.
just fallen off the face of Aruba.
They did return to their private lives. They didn't really face any further criminal charges related to Natalie's disappearance. And they were smart. They stayed out of the public spotlight, right? Which is very different than Joran, who was out there in the public spotlight.
Do you trust Vandersloot's confession? He claims that they were on the beach, he kicked her, bashed her head in with a brick, and then dragged her body out to sea. Do you guys believe that that's what actually happened? That that confession is legit?
I think part of it is. Other parts of it don't make sense. How did he kick her in the head when she was standing up after she'd kicked him in his groin? That's a pretty high kick to cause that much damage. I do believe he smashed her skull in. If he dragged her into the water, like he must have really dragged her, like swum her out there. Otherwise, she would have come back in. He must have taken her further out than just sort of left her at the water's edge and then wandered off down the beach with no evidence.
Maybe he weighted her down somewhere. Maybe he didn't even take her out into the water there. Maybe he took her body someplace else.
Joseph, what do you think? Do you trust his confession completely?
No, I think he's full of shit. This guy has had 10 different versions of what happened over the years. He's a complete sociopath and a pathological liar, and I don't believe anything he said. While I think it's possible that some of those aspects of the story are true, like Shauna mentioned, I do not believe for 1 second that you're going to take someone's body, swim it out, and just leave it, and it's not going to wash up on shore. I think if he did put her in the water, there was probably a boat involved, and I think there was probably some other co-conspirators that helped him get rid of the body.
Joseph, you're kind of right because I think you can't do that alone.
I grew up in a beach town. Like, I grew up in Huntington Beach. There's no way you're gonna be able to drag her body out past the surf. In what island was it?
Aruba.
Yeah, that's shark-infested water. There's no way in hell he was gonna be able to drag her body out past the surf. There had to be a boat involved. The only way the body completely disappeared altogether is that they threw it into shark-infested water, and then she was made, unfortunately, to be the food of sharks. If he had dragged her out that far, he would have gotten eaten by sharks as well. And I submit for evidence on that. There was a high school senior class that went down to the islands as their like senior class trip after they graduated. And one of the kids thought it would be funny to jump into the water. His body was never recovered and never seen again.
Steven, that video is wild. If you have not seen it, it's very, very sad, but it's crazy. This kid jumps into the water, You see a splash of something that looks like a fin, and he just disappears. It's terrifying. That is why I don't go in the ocean.
Holy hell, Stephen. I love having you here. Debbie, I want to hear from you.
Yeah. So, as far as his confession, I do believe that he murdered her in a way that we'll never know the truth, but it was probably really brutal. But other than that, I don't believe a word that comes out of that man's mouth. I think that he will lie about everything and anything. And the only thing I believe is that he did do it.
I kind of don't even know if the beach was ever even involved. I think something happened in that car. She was last seen getting into that vehicle with Vandersloot and the two brothers. You have the recording in the police car of them indicating that something happened in that car. I think they drove her somewhere and then they dumped her body using a boat.
There was mentioning of the body being cemented in a foundation or something. What was the take on that theory? Was it completely tossed out or disregarded or non-believable?
The thing is, this guy has told so many different stories over the years that everyone kind of just dismisses everything he said. But yeah, he did at one point say that his father buried the body in the foundation of a house, but they can never prove that.
The guy hasn't committed murder before. Is he in the news like they had a former case or something?
He has. He actually is in jail right now for murdering another woman, Stephanie Flores, in Peru.
Here's what I think. First of all, obviously, I don't think that she left with him expecting any kind of danger. I don't think that her death was planned. There's always some truth, even in the lies, right? And so I do think that part of his confession would be truthful. I do think that they were on the beach, Joseph. I'm always saying that because usually towards the end of a trip, you want to get that like last beach day in. So I think some of what he said was probably true.
I'm kind of with Joseph on this, and that it didn't even make it to the beach, that whatever happened happened in the car or maybe even his room. I don't know, but I think I'm with Joseph on the whole. It didn't happen at the beach.
I think it definitely happened just like he shared. I think he was trying to force himself on her. She refused and defended herself. And he probably got used to getting away with things or getting what he wanted. And he just went violent on her. I think he finally just told the truth, in my opinion.
Thanks, Mariana. Sha, I have a question for you. I think his confession came with a lot of legal incentive, right? And that complicates the credibility. But yet, that is done, right? To get the confession, you have to get the legal incentive. I'm just curious, is that a successful way to get a confession from a liar and a manipulator?
They did a plea bargain. Okay, you plead guilty. We'll give you concurrent instead of consecutive, and you tell us what happened. Now, they didn't just take him at his word for it. They did a lie detector, and I'm sure there's other information that was told that you guys didn't graphically detail, which I thank you for, that they believed. And the mother believes him, that this is what happened, that it was some sort of a sexual situation and he bashed her head in. How, when, where, we'll never really know. But that's what always has been presumed to have happened to her. And at least now he's admitted that's what he did. I think it was more important to the family at that point to get closure or an answer or a resolution than to never know.
You're bringing up a good point because really, when I look at that question, can we trust Joran Vandersloot's 2023 confession completely? What's interesting is that the details that he provided in 2023 did align with some previously undisclosed facts and forensic realities. So that did lend more weight from his past claims.
I think when we're dealing with an individual with this kind of temperament, ego and stuff, I don't find it hard to believe that his confession is true, especially when you think dealing with someone that maybe wants the spotlight that wants to prove that he's a macho man. So when he's in prison or whatever the case may be, he's drawing the attention and he kind of putting the word out there. I think it's more of an ego and trying to center himself and kind of establish himself as the bad guy. Because when he was in prison, he was getting in trouble for some drug activity or some criminal behaviors as well. To me, I don't find it hard to believe that it was a true confession, but I think it was staged to kind of draw the attention and to make him bigger and better.
If you watch some of the old interviews of him, he was on TV and it was just so gross. It was like you could tell he was loving the attention. I definitely got the vibe that he liked the infamy he got out of all this.
All this stuff that happened, this past fall, none of us really heard about it. It wasn't in the news. I didn't hear about him trying to attempt suicide until I read your document earlier today, Joseph. I don't know if I completely agree that it was a notoriety thing. Maybe he had hoped it would be, but it turned out he didn't get the notoriety he wanted. Now there's going to be the docu-series that you said is all dropping sometime in 2026. Now that's going to bring it all back around. But I don't know. I mean, from what his lawyer said, he's in the worst place possible. It's hell where he is. So in my mind, I think he's just living in hell. I think his life is just horrible, and he's probably not treated well, and any notoriety or anything that's aired, if it makes it to the prison, isn't going to do him any good.
He definitely belongs in hell. Hey guys, this is Mariana. You know what's interesting about this case is I had been in Aruba the year before this happened. And it was shocking to hear because I have never heard any story like that before about Aruba. It just always felt very safe. The other thing about him is that his dad was a lawyer, a famous lawyer in the island of Aruba.
You're right. He was a former Peruvian judge and prosecutor.
In his mind, I think he thought he was going to get away with this. Obviously, he had some criminal instincts. He was not going to do that once, but did it twice, right? And went to Peru and killed that other girl. And the fact that he was eager to get money from Natalee's mom is disgusting to me. That he tried to manipulate her, telling her that he was going to give her the information where Natalee's body was, and he never did. He just wanted the money. That just devastating. It makes me so sad that she has to endure that suffering. As a mother, I can't imagine someone taking my daughter from me that way. He definitely is where he belongs, and I hope he never gets out.
You send your daughter on this trip to basically celebrate a milestone in her life, and her life ends there. That, to me, in and of itself is devastating. I just cannot imagine being in her shoes and then getting this confession, but still really deep down not really knowing. I just can't imagine what she's gone through.
I was watching news wall to wall back in those days, and it was a constant story. I mean, it was just like every news hour, there was always an update for weeks. I just remember how bad I felt, especially for her mother, but for her father too. And for those other little girls who were on the trip, they felt so guilty. It was horrible, just horrible.
Do we know that this was a school-sponsored trip, or was it just a group of seniors that have recently graduated put together for themselves?
So it was a school organized senior graduation trip. It was sponsored and coordinated by the school, and there were adult chaperones. But here's the thing, they were all 18, so they were legal adults. The chaperones were there for logistics and emergencies, but the students were allowed to move freely. They were allowed to go out at night. They were allowed to make their own decisions.
Yeah, Adrienne, I watched an interview with one of the teachers who was the chaperone, and she said that there was virtually no oversight, no supervision. The chaperones didn't even know what rooms the students were staying in. So it really was kind of a free-for-all. They didn't check in with the kids every day. And to me, that seems a little bit reckless. I mean, granted, they are adults, so how much can you really tell an adult what to do? I thought that was a little bit weird. What do you think about that?
I know the minute my daughter turned 18, I got, you can't tell me what to do because I'm an adult.
And Jenna, you're right about that because first of all, the kids are all 18 already. So I was thinking the kids should have looked out for themselves. Like you should know who is here, keep record about your friends. And I shouldn't blame the sheriffs because nobody's perfect.
And the chaperones followed the guidelines and the structure for the trip that the school agreed to. They were really just there for emergencies.
I think that if it was a school trip, the school does have some culpability in it. And the reason I say that is because even if your child is still in school and they've already turned 18, do they walk around the school saying, oh, I'm not going to go to class because I'm an adult and I can do whatever I want to do? No, they have to follow the rules of the school. Just because they were adults didn't mean that they shouldn't follow some kind of protocol. And I do think that the school was a little lax on that, and they should have at least known the rooms that these kids were in. They had to check in at a certain time each day, maybe in the morning and maybe at night. So I do think that the school does have some culpability in it.
I just have to say, I love that you brought that up. So thank you. I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, I didn't go on a senior trip and it wasn't a school-sponsored trip, but we did have a teacher who was like a younger, cool teacher that everyone liked. And every year he would put together a trip and he would take students to a different country. I'm only like 2 years younger than Natalee Holloway, so it was around the same time. We went to Costa Rica. We were allowed to go off and do whatever we wanted, but we always had to check in. Like we always had dinner together, and the chaperone always knew generally where we were. So we had the freedom to do what we wanted. We weren't supposed to drink. Of course we did. We weren't supposed to gamble. Of course we went to the casino every night. But we still had to check in at least once a day so that he knew that we hadn't been taken and we weren't like, passed out on the side of the road somewhere. So for me, I think anytime you're doing a trip with kids of that age, even if they are technically adults, checking in once a day, that's like the bare minimum of what they should have done.
For my mom's 70th birthday, we went on a cruise, and I, at the time, was in my 40s. And I got to tell you, I had to check in with my mother once a day on this cruise. So, yeah, there should have been some kind of checks and balances.
It's interesting, like what the chaperones must have felt. I never really gave thought to all of those that were chaperoning and all the other students and the trauma. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine what they went through too. Oof.
And you actually read my mind, Adrienne. I was going to bring up the other kids at such a young age having to experience that horrific experience and to be so close to the actual event itself. I imagine is still impacting their lives and weighing on them in some way. So again, of course, the victim and their family is a primary focus, but we forget the other people involved in the traumatic effects that it had on them.
And I actually did read your mind just in case. If that makes you nervous, that's a good thing.
I would say kudos to her mother for not giving up and getting the answer finally that she was looking for. She really didn't know what exactly happened to her. I give her all the kudos of not giving up, even though it's not really peace of mind. I don't think it will ever be peace of mind for her, but an answer definitely will give her closure so she can move on. Yeah.
Mariana, that was beautifully said. Well, this case has really been a long, agonizing journey. Nearly 20 years of pain, perseverance, and the pursuit of truth. From a sunny island celebration that turned tragic to, like Mariana said, a beautiful mother's unyielding fight for answers. Natalee Holloway's story doesn't have the kind of ending that anyone hoped for, but you know what? It does stand as a testament to a family's quest for justice and a cautionary tale about how one person's evil acts can forever change many lives.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Debate the News True Crime. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Debate the News True Crime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. You can also join our live audience on the Chatter Social app, which is available in the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. You can catch us live on Chatter Social every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific Time. Until next time, stay safe and take care of yourself and each other. Good night.